Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the long-awaited debut album from Sampha called Process. I didn't really know what to expect going into this. I mean, I knew a little bit about Sampha, I recognized the name, but this English singer, songwriter, producer was never one that I had ever felt inclined to seek out on the benefit of his guest performances alone. For one, I was first introduced to him through Subtract, where his vocals were frequently featured on a couple of the albums, but maybe it's just a really bad concert experience a year or so back, but I've never really been all that fond of Subtract, and I wasn't really blown away from what I had heard from Sampha. Now that hasn't stopped him from collaborating or working with some of the biggest and most critically acclaimed names in hip-hop and R&B. Drake, Frank Ocean, Kanye West, FKA Twigs, and most recently a vocal contribution to Solange's last album that I remain less in love with than seemingly everybody else. So when I had heard that this album was getting mountains of critical acclaim from a wide variety of sources, from some that I respect, like a couple other YouTube critics, to some that I don't, which include a couple other publications, I figured there must be something to this guy's debut that caught everybody's ear, especially if the acclaim was this diverse. So I dug into that debut album Process. What did I find? Well, folks, man, I wish I liked this a lot more than I do. And this is seriously starting to get frustrating for me because once again, I'm diving into territory that I know exactly why so many critics are praising this album to high heavens. The writing, the themes of recovery and grief and self-care, Sampha's organic and expressive delivery against the delicate, jittery production. I completely get why people love this album, but I'm also not going to force something that's not there for me, and I couldn't really care for this as much as I wanted to. It reminds me a lot of the feelings I got when I covered FKA Twigs or Solange. I like this album, I completely see all the appeal, I know it's gonna get a ton of critical acclaim, but even more so than those albums, this record sits at the awkward place where I can intellectually appreciate what it's doing and its appeal a lot more than it resonates with me on an emotional level. I like it, I don't love it. And a not insignificant part of that is, brace yourself, Sampha as a singer. I've already said it once so far in this review, I would have said it if I covered Subtract back in 2014, and I'll say it here, I just don't really care for his delivery. And it's kind of hard to describe why. He's got a traditional R&B inflection and cadence when he sings, but there's an odd warbling huskiness where he mostly sits in his mid-range that never seems to hit a deeper level of soul to resonate with me. Maybe it would work if he delivered a little bit more of a rasp or stayed more in his lower range, or didn't constantly sound like he was on the verge of tears and with his voice cracking for so many of these songs, which, yes, I know, part of the point, we'll come back to this, which might be the reason why the angrier, darker tones of Blood on Me or Under, or the stripped-back, wistful piano ballad No One Knows Me Like the Piano actually work for me. They're a little older sounding, a little bit more world-weary, a little bit heavier, or at the very least ratcheting up the tension where the delivery can match a lot of the gravitas. But when he's dipping into the cleaner, overdubbed, higher tones or his falsetto like on Take Me Inside, I'm sorry folks, it's not clicking for me. Now granted, that song has its own set of issues, most notably coming in that piano melody that could have carried a workable tune if it had been remotely tuned well, that piano, which takes us to the instrumentation and production. And look, I'm not going to deny that it's experimental. The warping prevalence of contorted shrill synths, the plucky guitar and harp elements, the choppy percussion, in a mix that has plenty of space for it all to really spread out. It's very easy to make the Arca or 100 Waters comparisons. But you know what? At least Arca occasionally can pull together a decent thicker groove to balance out all the melodic fragments in his mix, which is where I think Sampha's material can really suffer for me. The grooves we do get are thin and choppy, nearly always seeming at the precipice of just coming apart in your hands, and are severely underserved in the low end. And no, throwing in fuzzy blocks of hip-hop or trap-inspired bass aren't always a workable solution when they aren't blended all that well. It connects for me on Blood on Me and to a lesser extent on Under, but that's more because that has strong underlying melodies and feature more tense propulsion in the vocals or slightly sharper melodies. Compare this to Plastic 100 Degrees Celsius, or the fuzzy touches on Reverse Faults, or the oddly tinny and stiff Timmy Thomas sample on Timmy's Prayer that I really wanted to like a lot more than I do, that then switches up into these brittle rattles against the bass and compressed layers of thinner backing vocals that never seem to hit the melodic climax that it's building to, and I'm just not as impressed. Look folks, Sampha's vocals are the sort that could do a lot with a solid, thicker, underlying groove to intensify the flow, and yet without it, he kind of feels unsupported. Hell, that's what happens on the warbling off-key flutters of Incomplete Kisses, or the harp-like touches against a more spacious, mixed, and restrained 80s synth line on What Shouldn't I Be, or the choppy, rattling plucks on Kora Sings. In the latter other two cases, neither song is bad, but with a sharper balance and slightly thicker groove. Kora sings this galloping groove could have had a little bit more to it to match the live drum line, which vanishes for the final quarter of the track for an atmospheric vocal exercise that doesn't complement anything and kind of kills the momentum, if I'm being honest. But what it lends this album is a perpetual feeling of nervous instability, which feels a bit awkward, especially when you consider the underlying lyrical themes of this album and that process. And yes, you could tack on grieving or coping to the title and the themes would align nearly exactly. Even before I discovered that much of this record was recorded during and after his mother died of cancer, there's a distinct sense of lingering loss and loneliness that runs deeply on this project. And what Sampha understands that this is indeed a process that can feel kind of like fits and false starts. So maybe the lyrics do kind of fit the uncomfortable instrumentation in a weird sort of way. I'll give him that. A common metaphor that runs through this first half of this album at least is sunlight, as he exposes himself to greater clarity and beginning to accept the searing pain that he knows is coming. And while he also knows there are nightmares coming as well, Blood on Me is particularly haunting in this regard, he knows that more than ever these are internal demons he needs to purge from his own mind to go forward. And look, I can't imagine what sort of pain and loss Sampha must be feeling, especially returning to his childhood home to reminisce on songs like No One Knows Me Like the Piano, which is so good. But when you follow the first four tracks that have that thematic focus with Then Take Me Inside, which seems less about letting go of a lost parent and more about setting a lover free, the themes start to feel a little bit more tenuous and abstract. And sure, you can make the argument that the toxic emotions that color the blame games of reverse faults, or the distant observations of a capricious woman on Under, or the mingled exposure of being a prisoner of love on Timmy's Prayer, or the choice to embrace fuller love on Incomplete Kisses, they're rooted in the emotions of his mother's passing. But look, it still feels like a bit of a thematic stretch here. He attempts to tie things back together with the closer What Shouldn't I Be, examining the differences between familial expectations and his own. But you know what, I can't help but feel that on this song, the call to a long-lost brother to reconnect was handled far better by A$AP Rock and Blood Sandwich last year. I appreciate that Sampha's trying to represent a more natural process. And you know what, I also like a lot of the language that he uses, drawing on liquid, textured sci-fi words that have a lot of character, derived from a very visual style of writing technique according to him. But you know what, I'll repeat what I've said about plenty of art house fix. Great visuals, they'll only take you so far. But here's the thing. I don't dislike this album. Hell, I wouldn't even say there's any outright bad songs here, so much as there are some frustrating ones that could be better. From a debut album, Sampha has a ton of promise, and his style of writing and production is unique enough to drive some real attention. I just wish that I liked it more. For me, it's a light 7 out of 10 and a recommendation, especially if anything I described is more to your liking. But as for me, well, as again, Sampha's got promise, and I'd love to see some of that come to fruition. So maybe try again for the next project, but as it is, this is good. I don't mind it. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I got the poll up there, so everyone who wants to tell me how wrong I am, there's your opportunity. But if you guys want to buy the album, the link in the description is right there below. If anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. If you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process, the link to my Patreon is right here, where a couple times a week you guys get to vote on my process, and once a week on Saturdays, you guys get to add records or even movies to my schedule. But until then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.